All right, real quick, what's your favorite Joni Mitchell album? Wait, don't tell me. It's Blue, right? I mean, it's gotta be Blue. I mean, California, A Case of You, freaking River. How could it not be Blue? Blue is clearly a slam dunk for that top spot. Or is it?
Lyrics to go.
Welcome back to Lyrics to Go. I am Daniel Maté, and I'm very glad you're with me. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. If this is like your third time, also welcome. Either way, please click like if you like it, share if you want to share it. I hope you do. And either way, please subscribe to the channel. That way we can keep growing our audience for the lyric-minded and lyric-curious out there.
The most curious adventure I have ever had.
Now let's just get something out of the way. Of course, I think Blue is a fantastic album. I mean, it's a classic, right? And there's a reason that it's always ranked at the very top of lists of Joni Mitchell albums, and when you read ranked lists of the albums of the 1970s, or even albums of all time, you're very likely to see this one on there somewhere. I'd even go so far as to say that Joni Mitchell's Blue is the pinnacle, like the crowning achievement of the entire singer-songwriter genre. What do I mean by singer-songwriter? Well, you know, after Bob Dylan and the whole folk and then the folk rock wave of the early to mid-60s, there emerged a class, you might say, a cohort of sensitive, introspective, usually LA-based, but some of them were in New York, singer-songwriters. So we're talking about artists like Carole King, James Taylor, Jackson Browne, and Laura Nyro, and Leonard Cohen, and Paul Simon, and Van Morrison, and Janis Ian, and of course, Joni Mitchell. And of course, this genre has had a huge influence. You can hear echoes of it in the work of Ani DiFranco, Elliott Smith, Tracy Chapman, and even someone like Justin Vernon of Bon Iver. But see, that's the thing. While Blue totally captures the singer-songwriter genre to a T, I don't think it captures its own artist to a T. I don't think that the best of and the deepest and the wisest and the most innovative and really the most distinctive of Joni Mitchell is captured on that album, as great as it is. What's very interesting to me is that it's in the immediate aftermath of Blue's smash success, which really rocketed her to mega stardom. She was already famous and well loved, but this took it to a whole new level all over the world. That's when you start to hear the colors starting to get less primary, if you will, and more shaded, different hues, both musically, vocally, and especially lyrically. And now let's get into my personal picks of songs that really represent Joni Mitchell beyond Blue.
I am a woman of heart and mind, with time on her hands, no child to raise.
Now, I really love this album. I came to it kind of late. The first thing I noticed is that she's sitting next to a bunch of arbutus trees, which is a tree that's native to the West Coast, especially coastal British Columbia, which is where I'm from. And it turns out the photo was taken on her property on the Sunshine Coast, which is just north of Vancouver. And she still has a property there, and I'm not sure if she's still splitting her time between LA and there. I don't know if her health allows it. But it's been a real place of refuge and much needed isolation for her. And she went there in the aftermath of Blue's mega success, and that's where she wrote this album, For the Roses. And there aren't really any big hits on this album. Maybe You Turn Me On, I'm a Radio. Apparently that was sort of her cheeky response when David Geffen said to her, come on, write a hit song. And she kind of jokingly wrote it. And, you know, it's a great tune.
I'm a country station, I'm a little bit corny, I'm a wild.
But there's something kind of tongue-in-cheek about it. Anyway, across the album, there's a whole new level of sagacity and maturity here to Joni, and nowhere is that more evident than in the song Woman of Heart and Mind. One thing to note about this song is it doesn't have a chorus, it doesn't have a hook, and it doesn't have any bridges or B-sections. It's a rather rare kind of format that's more common in folk music, but it's essentially known as an AAA format because it's just a series of A sections. Now, in a previous episode, I mentioned Stephen Sondheim's dictum that God is in the details. Another one of his commandments of lyric writing is that content dictates form. So this AAA format, where there's no hook, There's no repeated lines. In fact, the hook, the title of the song, only appears once, and it's the first line, I am a woman of heart and mind. The reason that's so effective here is it's the perfect choice for what the lyric is doing. It's almost like a monologue, or maybe a diary entry, or more likely a letter, which you sense she may or may not ever send to the person she's writing to. And the lyrics to this song showcase Joni Mitchell's emotional X-ray vision. She just sees through people, especially people she's sleeping with. And not only has she slept with some of the best, she has written and recorded even better songs about them. I'll get into that in part B of this episode. Wait for it, you horny bastards. Now, I mentioned her maturity on this album. One mark of maturity, I think, is the ability to hold contradictions at the same time, to have mixed feelings, to have a nuanced, complex view. And this song exemplifies that. So on one level, it's kind of a call out, like she's really nailing this guy in terms of his flaws and his faults. So there's moments like, after the rush, when you come back down, you're always disappointed, nothing seems to keep you high. Drive your bargains, push your papers, win your medals, fuck your strangers, don't it leave you on the empty side. And already you can hear it's blunt, maybe a little harsh, but there's a kind of searching compassion in it too, the sense of trying to get through to someone with a probing question. Doesn't it leave you empty? And there's a very famous lyric from a couple of years ago that asks a similar kind of question.
Aren't you tired trying to fill that void?
And then she takes a dig at his social charisma and his intellectual bravado. She says, is it all books and words? Or do you really feel it? Do you really laugh? Do you really care? Do you really smile when you smile? And she goes on, she says, you criticize and you flatter. You imitate the best, and the rest you memorize. And that is, if I'm honest, a real touché line for me, as is this whole song. And I think a lot of male egos will relate to it, if they're honest. And actually, I just discovered this great quote from an interview she gave once. She said, quote, my stuff is not male fantasy at all. It's instructed to make men a little bit more informed. And if that's all there was to the song, then you'd basically have a precursor to Alanis-style self-righteousness.
I hate to bug you in the middle of dinner.
But it's more layered than that. One layer I can see I've already mentioned, which is her trying to get through to him. So the critique is in some ways an attempt to be constructive. But the thing that puts it over the top in terms of maturity is her own self-awareness. And you see this throughout Joni Mitchell's music. And again, this is what I find so relatable. She's feeling her feelings, she's having her experiences, she's loving her lovers, but she's watching herself do it. And there's a part of her that's always at a remove, commenting, wondering, pondering, worrying, and it's aware that it's aware. And so, like a really great director, she's able to combine different angles and give you different points of view on the same situation, from super close up to almost a bird's eye view. So what does she say about herself? Well, it starts off, I am a woman of heart and mind, with time on her hands, no child to raise. By the way, even the title itself, Heart and Mind. It's not just feelings, it's also this mind that won't quit. You come to me like a little boy, and I give you my scorn and my praise. So there's a great double-sidedness to those lines, right? You come to me like a little boy, and I give you my scorn and my praise. I'm playing into this dynamic too. You think I'm like your mother, or another lover, or your sister, or the queen of your dreams, or just another silly girl when love makes a fool of me. So in a way she's saying, you think I am these things, and I play the role. Later she calls one on herself. She says, I'm looking for affection and respect, a little passion, and you want stimulation, nothing more. That's what I think. Well, again, we could leave it there and say, in your face, dude, and then basically we'd have,
He's a cold-hearted snake. Look into his eyes.
But the very next line undercuts that spirit of accusation. But you know, I'll try to be there for you when your spirits start to sink. And that you know, I just noticed, has a kind of double valence. On the one hand, it's like, well, you know. But on the other hand, it's like, you know full well that even though I want something deeper than you seem to want, I will still try to be there for you when your spirits start to sink. When you need support, I will play that role again and again. And then the final lines of the song end on that constructive note, but there's also a kind of sadness to them. I get the sense that this is where she really doesn't know if he'll ever receive this message. She says, "You know the times you impress me most are the times when you don't try, when you don't even try." And the song ends right there on that note. So what you have is this tragic picture almost of two intelligent people enmeshed in a dynamic that probably doesn't serve either of them. And she at least knows better, but she's staying anyway. I think for many of us that is hashtag relatable.
It always seems so righteous at the start, when there's so much laughter, when there's so much spark, when there's so much sweet.
Moving along chronologically, her next album was called Chord and Spark. And this album was also quite a popular and successful album, mainly on the strength of two big hit songs, Help Me and Free Man in Paris.
Not like we love our freedom.
Both of which are super smooth.
This is ultra smooth.
You can already hear a real evolution in the way she's depicting romantic relationships. One way you can gauge that progression is by sort of juxtaposing two similar lines, one from the opening track of Blue, All I Want, and one from a song called Just Like This Train off Chord and Spark. In All I Want, she says, I want to knit you a sweater, I want to write you a love letter, I want to make you feel free. It's giddy, it's energetic, it's youthful, it's like unrestrained enthusiasm. But on Just Like This Train, she's on a solo cross-country train ride, presumably, and she says,
Dreaming of the pleasure I'm gonna have, watching your hairline recede, my vain darling.
Now, recede is the rhyming word. It rhymes with read a couple of lines before, but she just can't resist throwing in that little dig, my vain darling. But it's got a warm kind of teasing tone to it, and it just sounds like an older person, and it's an older person in her 30s looking ahead to middle age and kind of poking fun at him for his advancing middle age. Yeah, and that's one of those lines that even though I can't personally relate to it, I think it's a pretty great lyric. Oh, fuck. The song I picked off this album is called Car on a Hill, and this one actually paints a specific scene. It's like a little vignette, a little theater piece. I've been sitting up waiting for my sugar to show. I love that alliteration. And you don't see it on the page because sugar is spelled just with S and show is SH. But she has such an instinctive musical gift when it comes to language and a linguistic gift when it comes to music that she just finds that. So I've been sitting up waiting for my sugar to show. I've been listening to the sirens and the radio. He said he'd be over 3 hours ago. I've been waiting for his car on the hill. And you can just see it. I mean, it's LA somehow, and indeed it is. This album is a very Los Angeles album. On the song California from Blue, she was pining for that state. Here, she's there, for better or worse.
But I couldn't let go of LA, city of the fallen angel.
So there she is, waiting for his car on the hill. Where does her mind go immediately next? To him, and how cool he is. He makes friends easy. He's not like me. I watch for judgment anxiously. Now, where in the city can that boy be? There's almost an implicit self-blaming in there, like maybe if I was more like him, I'd be out with him right now instead of
waiting for a car, climbing the hill.
And that's the little hook. And it happens twice in the song because the song only has 2 verses with a little piano interlude in the middle, which is gorgeous. And we're right into the second verse. He's a real good talker. I think he's a friend. So we're back to kind of praising his gifts and then this admission of, yeah, I think he's a friend.
Methinks the lady doth protest too much.
Fast tires come screaming around the bend, but there's still no buzzer. They roll on, and I'm waiting for his car on the hill. So we have like a false alarm. Is it him? No, it's someone else, and I'm still waiting. And then she zooms out to the widest possible lens that she possibly can. She's not just talking about herself, she's talking about all of us in relationship. It always seems so righteous at the start, when there's so much laughter, when there's so much spark, when there's so much sweetness in the dark. Beautiful, spark, dark, and of course the word spark comes from the title of the album, Court and Spark, and it's those sparks that fly when courtship is happening, you know, the literal Tinder, to coin a phrase. And then she rhymes it with dark, and she finds this beautiful phrase to link that rhyme up to, when there's so much sweetness in the dark. But then she zooms right back into her situation, waiting for a car, climbing, climbing, climbing the hill. And it's as if she's saying, you know, 1 minute you're all caught up in the bliss, and the next minute you're sitting by the window waiting for a guy who may or may not show up. Cinematic, specific, brilliant. Joni's next album, The Hissing of Summer Lawns, is her most removed, I think. This is her writing vignettes, writing short stories almost, about characters who may bear some resemblance to her, but she keeps them at a real authorial remove. And it's very effective. She lets the listener kind of arrive at their own conclusions about what's happening. She really trusts the intelligence of her listener, and she forces us to listen in a very particular way that we don't get when the artist is spelling it all out for us. So this is the title track, and it's just an incredible little short story. And it's even phrased like a short story, you know, third person, past tense. He bought her a diamond for her throat. He put her in a ranch house on a hill. She could see the valley barbecues from her windowsill, see the blue pools in the squinting sun, hear the hissing of summer lawns. Do you remember what I said about how her voice transformed over these few albums into a real jazz instrument? Just listen to how she phrases and sings this particular line.
See the blue pools in the squinting sun, hear the hissing of summer lawns.
So smooth.
It took me a while to figure out what the hissing of summer lawns referred to. Of course, she's talking about those sprinklers that go around and round. But of course, it's more than that, right? There's a menacing quality to the sound of hissing. There's also, it's reminiscent of whispering, like secrets, like the petty gossip of the suburbs. And finally, the serpent-like motif, which is echoed on the album cover. And so immediately within 6 lines, we get this absolutely crystal clear, crystal blue, bright picture of a California suburb, very wealthy, and someone who's essentially become a kept woman. You know, he put her in a ranch house on the hill. And we get the sense this is probably a very cold, loveless relationship, like the diamond for her throat. I mean, we hear about diamonds around people's necks, but this one fits right on her throat where her voice would be. And what's that kind of necklace called? A choker. Every single one of these details, like a short story writer who knows that they have to be super economical because they don't have a lot of space. A lyric is even more economical than that. And Joni Mitchell uses every square centimeter of that real estate to the hilt. He put up a barbed wire fence to keep out the unknown. And on every metal thorn, just a little blood of his own. Of course, we get the implication very clearly that he's also keeping in the known. He's keeping her in. So he's enforcing a separation between his woman, his wife, his girlfriend, and the rest of the world to which she once belonged. And as if that's not enough, to mark his territory completely in this very visceral way, he puts just a little bit of his own blood on every metal thorn. And who thinks to refer to barbed wire as a fence with metal thorns on it? Well, Joni does. And the next line tells us so much. She patrols that fence of his to a Latin drum and the hissing of summer lawns. So she's patrolling the fence to her own prison. And you can see her looking through the barbed wire fence to the valley barbecues and the swimming pools and the sprinklers and the lawns. And you're left to imagine what attitude or emotion she's feeling. But this word patrol conveys a sense that she's trying to gain some agency from it. It's like she's telling herself she's the guard, when in fact she's the captive. And then in the final stanza, you know, she sums it up just beautifully and opens up the picture a little bit. She says, he gave her his darkness to regret and good reason to quit him. That's the first time we really hear how this woman feels about all this. And she has good reason to quit him, which kind of tells us that she doesn't. And then from that zoomed in kind of intimate emotional portrait, she zooms out to something very concrete and physical. He gave her a room full of Chippendale, which is a kind of furniture, that nobody sits in. So rather than saying the woman feels lonely, she paints this very lonely picture instead. She shows rather than tells, and the picture is of opulence mixed with real coldness and sort of a lack of human spirit. But again, there's no straight up victimhood, you know? Still, she stays with a love of some kind. It's the lady's choice, the hissing of summer lawns. So, you know, Joni is not going to let anyone off the hook. The woman here is clearly on some level the victim of a misogynist culture that allows men to have dominion over women, that gives them economic power, that takes away women's agency, but not to the point that Joni Mitchell is willing to say this woman has nothing to do with this. She stays with the love of some kind. She loves him in some kind of way. It's the lady's choice. She's choosing this manicured, landscaped, Chippendaled, sprinklered life. And that line about the lady's choice is both ironic and not ironic. And the kind of songwriter who can be ironic and not ironic at the same time, sign me up. Well, I should have known. There's so much to say about Joni Mitchell's lyrics. They're so rich. There's so many different things going on different layers that we run out of time. But I will come back with part 2 of this episode on Joni Mitchell Beyond Blue very soon. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this installment, please click like, please share the video, and I would love it if you'd subscribe to the channel so we can keep exploring the wonderful world of lyrics together. And hey, if you just can't get enough lyrical goodness, head on over to patreon.com/lyrics2go show. That's where you can become a patron of this channel. You'll be helping me create more, but also, more importantly, from your point of view, you'll be getting amazing swag, great incentives, bonus content. So for instance, you'll get like a handy playlist of all the songs I'm covering in this episode in one place. Plus, I'm going to add a bunch more Joni Mitchell songs that I won't have time to talk about here, but that you may not have heard of and that you may enjoy discovering. Thanks for watching. Thanks for helping me create a world where no one has to say,
I don't really listen to the lyrics.
No more! No more! No more!
Until next time, I'm Daniel Maté saying, I've got lyrics to go. And now you do too.
Settle down into the clickety-clack with the clouds and the stars to read. Dreaming of the pleasure I'm gonna have. Watching your hairline recede, my vague darling. Watching your hair in clouds and stars. I'm rocking away